Hello and welcome to another film in this series about the history of runes and runic magic. My name is Alban from Northern Viking Silver, and today I'm going to look at some healing runes. Now there's a piece of skull found in Ribe in Denmark from the early 8th century, and there are some runes carved on it, and they tell us that it belonged to a man called Bor. And this is what the inscription says: Ulf and Odin and High Tyr help Bor against these, pain and dwarf stroke. And there's a hole drilled in the piece of skull, and Bor obviously wore it as an amulet or a protection charm against pain and whatever dwarf stroke was. So this is an example of healing runes. And in Halvamal, the poem in the Old Edda, Odin mentions that he uses healing runes, and Sigurdrufa promises Sigurd that she will give him Likenstaffer, healing runes. So there was obviously a concept of using runic magic to help cure people. Now in the early Middle Ages, it was believed that disease was caused by harmful spirits that entered the body through some orifice or by piercing the body with invisible darts, known as elf shot. We have so a basic method to treat this illness then was to drive these demons or harmful spirits out. So there are some Anglo Saxon healing manuscripts that survive, and they give us some examples of these kind of exorcisms of harmful spirits. So one of them reads, for instance, "Out little spear if herein it be." There's another charm against a growth or wen, and it runs, "When, little wen, here you shall not build nor have any abode. You shall go north, hence to the neighbouring hill." Bad luck for the neighbours. There's a later Scandinavian charm that runs, "You troll who is in here, you must go out, you must flee." So we see from the Ribe charm that the gods could also be harnessed to help drive out these harmful spirits. And in fact, in Anglo-Saxon England, in these healing manuscripts, there's Christ himself is also used to drive out a harmful spirit. One of them says, "Fly, devil, Christ pursues you. When Christ is born, the pain will go." Now I'm going to look at some Scandinavian healing charms, and they also try and banish the demons that cause forms of disease. So there's a copper amulet found from Sigtuna in Sweden. It uses the word Thors, which is a word for giant or demon or ogre. I'm going to use ogre as the word to translate it here. This is what the inscription says: "Ogre of wound fevers, lord of ogres, flee now. You have been found. Have for yourself 3 pains, wolf. Have for yourself 9 needs, wolf. 3 ice runes. These ice runes are all you will get, wolf. Make good use of the healing charms." So in this type of spell, the harmful spirit is named and exorcised. And notice also groups of runes are carved against it, in this case ice runes. But we know of references in other spells to 9 need runes or 7 Thors runes carved against someone. Now there's a similar spell, bizarrely enough, written in a manuscript from 12th century Canterbury. It also names the demon Lord of Ogres. So listen to this: "Giril wound causer, go now, you are found. May Thor use his power against you, Lord of Ogres, Giril wound causer, against blood vessel pus." This is like a really exceptional charm because it's written in Old Norse in an Anglo-Saxon holy manuscript in the 12th century, and it actually uses Thor as a power to banish the disease. So it's like we know of stories of Thor fighting giants, and it's as though this pagan tradition is still remembered where Thor is used and invoked against a harmful ogre. So some amulets are used to banish spirits. There are other amulets that are designed to protect against malignant spirits. So an example is a 12th century copper amulet from Högstena in Sweden, which runs, "I incant against the spirit, against the walker, against the rider, against the runner, against the sitter, against the signer, against the traveller, against the flyer. It shall wither and completely die. So this is protection rather than banishment. Oh, I want to look at some really interesting inscriptions. And these are 3 rune rings with runic inscriptions on, found from northern England from the 9th century. Now these 3 rings have a similar inscription. So it runs like this. Now, this inscription is pretty much impossible to interpret, but that doesn't stop the runologists from giving it a good go. So some of them reckon that this inscription actually contains some words of Old Irish, which were used as a charm against bleeding. And similar words from Old Irish turn up in some of the Anglo Saxon manuscripts and also in one of the 12th century rune sticks from Norway. So these rings seem to be inscriptions to protect against bleeding. There is also an interesting example of how a magical word can come into use from a foreign language. So it's foreignness itself helps it be seen as a magical word because it's so strange. So there's a great example of this from the medieval rune sticks. Perhaps you've seen this formula before. Okay, it appears to be Latin, although it isn't. It's not translatable as Latin words. If you haven't seen it before, the words run in different directions and spell the same thing. Now this formula first turns up in Pompeii in the 1st century CE, scratched on a wall, and then it finds its way into Christian tradition. But no one really knows where it comes from. There are different theories. Some people think it's Pythagorean, some kind of numerology. Others think it has Gnostic roots or Jewish roots or Christian roots. But wherever it came from, it migrated and it changed its meaning through the ages. So it turns up in early Christian texts, in Coptic Christianity and Ethiopian Christianity, as the name of the 5 wounds of Christ, or the 5 nails of the cross. It then gets into Byzantine Christianity and later medieval Christianity, where it's thought to be the names of angels, or the names of the shepherds who actually visited the Christ child. So it has all different kinds of ideas. And then later in Christianity, people begin to believe that it's an anagram of the Christian prayer Pater Noster. And then, bizarrely enough, it even turns up in some books of black magic in the 19th century, as an invocation to Satan. So this is an example of how a magical formula, by its very foreignness, can be brought into practice, and then it changes over time. And we can be pretty sure that sort of change would have been happening with some of the runic spell words. But anyway, this Sartor Arepo formula turns up in runic inscriptions 8 times. Which brings me on to another formula which occurs in quite a lot of inscriptions throughout Sweden, Denmark, Norway and Iceland. Now this inscription is always encrypted, which means the letters are deliberately jumbled up. So this is the way it occurs on a rune stone from Viking Age Sweden. And if the words were rearranged into the correct order, this is what they would say. Thistle, mistle, kistil, which translates as thistle, mistletoe, little chest. Now this turns up in various forms on different amulets throughout the period. First of all, it's not really easy to say what it means, but possibly it changed meanings. The most important thing is it's encrypted, it's always jumbled up. And this idea of encryption, you can find it in some of the earlier rune sticks as well, or runic inscriptions. For instance, the spell word laukar is found broken up in between other rows of letters, which of course doesn't make understanding or translating these old inscriptions any easier. Oh, I think there's one more kind of charm type that I need to mention. And this is narrative charm. It's a kind of sympathetic magic. So it's where a runic charm seems to refer to a story of a like situation or a similar situation. If we go back to those healing manuscripts from Anglo Saxon England, one of them tells the story of how Woden smote a poisonous servant into 9 pieces. And this serves as a charm against poison because it's telling of a similar story. There's another charm from Old High German called the Merseberg charm that talks about how Wotan heals Balder's foal of a broken hoof or a sprained hoof. So this is a charm used against a sprain. And some of the runic inscriptions seem to refer to other stories of a similar situation. So this is a kind of sympathetic magic where comparing it to a story, a like situation, is meant to bring power into the current situation. So I'm going to round off now this film on healing charms, but I should say that in the later period, in the medieval times, nearly all the inscriptions in Norway start to use Christ and saints as the source of power. And actually, the runic inscriptions start to be written in Latin. So even though they're written in runes, the language they use is Latin as the influence of the Christian church gets stronger and stronger. So beware any stories you hear about the Christian church being down on the use of runes, because a lot of these Christian prayers are in runes. I mean, occasionally there are times when churchmen have a go at the use of runes, but this is usually like part of a general pushback against the use of superstition and magic. So that'll do as a quick run through of types of healing spells used in runes. In the next film, which will be the last film, I'm going to look at some other magical inscriptions. See you there.